Thank you for joining. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Elisa Gonzalez. I am an associate at Community Science. I am joined by my colleague, Yu and Sean, and by a great group of panelists. And today we have the privilege of hosting this webinar, where we will be discussing how to make farm-to-food bank programs work. And so here is what we hope that you take away from this discussion today. First, to understand how farm-to-food bank programs can serve as a strategy to address food insecurity and also to strengthen local food systems. To also learn from the experience of partners involved in a program like this. And as part of that discussion, to specifically learn about the farm-to-food bank fulfillment process. And then finally, to identify lessons learned to expand the program's impact, and that could also be helpful for partners in other communities that are involved in similar programs or are looking to implement similar programs. And then here is our agenda for today to accomplish these objectives. First, we will discuss the problem of increased food insecurity and overall disruptions to the food system that we have seen since the pandemic. Then we will discuss how farm-to-food bank programs have served as a strategy to address this problem and how this program has been implemented here in Montgomery County, Maryland. Then we will hear from the experience of two partners and an administrator involved in this program. And finally, we will have a facilitated discussion and we'll answer questions from the audience. And please feel free to drop your questions or comments in the chat box as we continue our conversation. So today, we have the honor of having three partners involved in the Montgomery County program joining us. First, we have Jenna Umbriac, Director of Programs at Mana Food Center. And Mana Food Center is the local administrator of Montgomery County's Farm-to-Food Bank program. We also have Megan Joe, Operations Director of Hunger Relief Programs for So What Else. So What Else is a local organization working to improve the lives of children and families in the Baltimore, Washington metro area. And So What Else receives food from the program for their food assistance services. And finally, we have Indhu Balasubramaniam from Amaranth Acres. And Amaranth Acres is a local family-owned vegetable farm and fruit orchard that supplies produce to the program. So thank you so much for your time and expertise. We are really grateful to have you today. And here is a little bit about us at Community Science. Community Science is a research and development organization. We are located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, so right here in Montgomery County. We work with partner organizations on solutions to social problems through community and other systems changes, and also by fostering learning and improving capacity for social change. And here at Community Science, we see food security as a key component of a strong community. Due to our approach, we have supported the work of partners working to promote food security. And this includes working with partners here in the county or home of Montgomery County that are working to address food insecurity in our community. So today we will be digging a little bit deeper on that work by exploring how farm-to-food bank programs can serve as a strategy to not only address immediate food security needs, but also to develop capacities and partnerships to strengthen the community. So before our panelists go into their presentation and discussion, we wanted to start by providing some grounding for that discussion and why we see farm-to-food bank programs as an important component of local efforts to address food insecurity and strengthen the community. So over the past 2 years, in the context of the pandemic, we have seen first, increasing food insecurity, which has led to increased demand on food assistance providers. We also saw how pandemic control measures and supply chain disruptions affected market opportunities for local farms and food producers. So on the one hand, we have increasing food insecurity, so more need. And on the other hand, we have reductions in market opportunities for local farms, which leads to potential food waste. So then these circumstances have increased awareness of the importance of strong local food systems to facilitate access to nutritious foods, prevent waste, and also address food security threats during emergencies such as the pandemic. This increased awareness also led to new investments in local food security systems to meet this increasing need. And food banks and other food assistance providers have received additional resources from these new investments to meet this increase in demand. However, historically, we know that most food assistance has come from programs that provide donated or surplus commodities and mainly canned or box foods. So this serves to mitigate the immediate need, but doesn't necessarily contribute to long-term solutions to food insecurity. So then the question that we ask ourselves and the problem that we hope to address today during this conversation, this webinar, is how can food assistance organizations contribute to longer-term solutions, systemic solutions to food insecurity and to strengthen local food systems? So hopefully our panelists will provide some answers to that question. And overall, we see a potential solution to this problem in the promotion of engagement between food assistance providers and local agriculture. And then we see farm to food bank programs as examples of these efforts by food assistance organizations to contribute to systemic changes by engaging local agriculture. And over the past decades, we have seen that programs have emerged across the country to promote this engagement. And examples of these programs that some of you might be familiar with include gleaning, gardening, and farmer partnerships. So to give you a general sense of what we mean by each of these, by gleaning, we mean the harvesting or gathering of leftover fruits and vegetables, and then distributing these to food banks or other food relief programs. And then by gardening or garden support programs, we have food banks supporting community gardens in low-income areas, and then receiving the produce as donations. And then by farmer partnerships, we mean when food assistance organizations contract with farmers for single crops or to supply a mix of food for distribution to low-income households. And among these three types of engagement between food assistance providers and local agriculture, current literature points to farmer partnerships as one of the most promising strategies to build community capacity for healthy food production. And programs such as farm to food bank partnerships do this because they not only increase access to nutritious foods among participants, but they also contribute to support local farmers, develop and strengthen connections between local consumers and local producers, and in some cases also offer work for beneficiaries. So given all that, and in the context where we see ourselves currently, the pandemic recovery context, we see this as an opportunity to reflect on what is needed to strengthen this program's role in promoting community capacity for healthy food production and also a more equitable food system. To provide some additional background for our panelist discussion of how farm to food bank programs can accomplish these objectives, we also wanted to present an overview of what we see as 4 key components of farm to food bank programs. And this is based again on a review of the literature and also on the experience of partners here in the county. And our panelists, when they go into the presentations, they will be providing more details and examples of each of these components and how they operate here in the county. So here are are the 4 key components that we see as the main areas of work in farm to food bank programs. First, there is funding and coordination activities. Then we have support for farm partners. Then we consider the capacities that are needed for food assistance providers. And then what are the data collection strategies that can help to support program planning and improvement? And I'm just gonna provide a very brief highlights for each of these components in the next several slides. So first, as part of funding and coordination, we consider the availability of funding and resources to support program operations and to adequately compensate farmers, a very important part of these programs. We also consider the existence of a strong collaborative infrastructure and a system of partners and volunteers to support this program. And this also includes having strong local food system leadership, which can be provided by entities such as food policy councils. And as I mentioned, the availability of systems and volunteer support to get the food from the farm to the food assistance providers. Here we also consider the existence of, or the work of an experienced administrator. And this is particularly important given the unique coordination and communication needs of these types of programs and the diversity of partners that are involved. And the final point that we wanted to highlight here is the support from local government agencies. And these could be local departments of health or agriculture, which play a key role bringing together partners across different sectors in the food system. So the second area that we wanted to highlight, the second component, are strategies to support farmer partners. And this includes the formalization of partnerships with farmers through memorandums of understanding or other contractual mechanisms, the availability of capacity building support to sustain farmer participation in the program. And then the third area that we think is also very important is the integration of local farms into the food security network. So how can farmers be brought to the table as part of the development of overall strategies to strengthen food assistance and local food security networks? Then the third area we wanted to highlight are the capacities of food assistance providers. And as part of this area, we wanted to highlight first the importance of logistics and infrastructure. So here thinking about the capacities that food assistance organizations need to process, receive, and store fresh produce. So it's not the same to distribute a can of beans than to distribute these beautiful eggs that we have here in this slide. So what are the capacities like storage, refrigeration, staff knowledge that are needed for that? The other area that we include as part of capacities of food assistance providers is the existence of connections with other social service providers, like workforce development or preventive care, to further expand food assistance providers' role, addressing the root causes of food insecurity. And then finally, another important capacity will be the capacity to engage and gather input from beneficiaries to understand food preferences, needs, and challenges, and then to use this information to improve service delivery. And then the fourth area that we wanted to bring to your attention is data collection strategies. And this is related to the last point, the importance of integrating strategies to collect data and feedback for program planning and improvements. And here we see particularly important first to collect data and feedback that allows partners to understand beneficiaries' needs and preferences, farmers' motivations and constraints, what are the gaps and barriers to access and participation at the different levels of partnership, and then to document successes and challenges of participation among the different partners to elevate the stories and to also identify where to intervene to improve the relationships. And this could include gathering feedback on site, implementing surveys of the various stakeholders, among other data collection strategies that I'm pretty sure our audience is familiar with. With that, I am going to send it to Jenna after providing that context about the role of farm to food bank programs, addressing food security constraints and improving the food system. Jenna will be talking specifically about the Montgomery County Farm to Food Bank program, and she will be providing us with an overview of the program and how it has been implemented over the past couple of years. So thank you so much, Jenna, and take it away.
Great. Thanks, Elisa. We appreciate being here and being able to share about this program that we're so proud to be a part of. So next slide. We actually didn't, I don't know who has the power to change the slide. Thank you. Great. So you did a wonderful job setting this up in terms of what were the forces at play when this program began. And when I say began, I actually don't mean maybe began for the very first time. MANA has had a history of working really closely with the farming community in Montgomery County, but it was doing so at a much lower volume than we were able to throughout this program. And I'll tell you about the evolution of it as we go through. But we have been working with about 4 farms directly through those formalized partnerships that Elisa mentioned, as well as working with farm market vendors through picking up food at the end of several farmers markets in the county. And that was less of a purchase program and a little bit more of a here's some money to say thank you for providing this unsold product to us at the end of market. But it was part and parcel of our original farm to food bank programming at MANA. And Elisa also mentioned an important factor in the success of these programs being an experienced administrator. And I think it was those existing and long-term partnerships we already had with farms. And we already had the knowledge of how to work closely with farmers that allowed us to really pivot very quickly when the pandemic came about and this kind of opportunity to expand those relationships came up. So I think it's already been well established that, of course, the pandemic caused a lot of folks to be in the situation where they might need food assistance more than we had experienced before. And you see from this slide, it shows that we've seen overall a 40% increase in the number of people seeking food assistance from us. That's down a little bit from the very peak of the pandemic, which I think was at about a 60% increase. But suffice it to say, we were looking for additional food, and so were the many other organizations in the county providing this important support. And we wanted to provide, and I've always wanted to provide, the freshest, healthiest food that we can to our participants. And when supply chain issues began, that Elisa really spoke about already, we knew we wanted to turn to local sources to bypass some of those supply chain issues inherent in our global food system. And so it was a great win-win in that regard. And finally, we wanted to, and really have a great obligation, I think, in this county where we have such a diverse audience for our food assistance services, where we've got representation from countries all over the globe, and we want to provide food that is familiar to people and fits in with their traditional foodways. So that was another opportunity that existed when starting to make these relationships with new local farms, because many of them were already specializing in foods that were traditional to their own backgrounds. And you'll hear about a little bit more about that later. Next slide. Great. So our program really had 2 goals, and some of which have already kind of come up, but I'll be very specific about them. So the first was to buy what farmers already had in the field. And in many cases, their markets were disrupted. Farms that had grown for restaurants, for instance, those restaurants closed down. They didn't have that same market available to them. We have some robust pick your own operations here in Montgomery County, and that was questionable for a time. They were unsure if they could invite the public in to pick some of that product. So we wanted to first and foremost be a replacement market for that product that was already out in the fields. And then we've really wanted to build the resiliency of the local food system so that we know this isn't going to be the only large scale, emergency we're going to face in the coming years. And so we wanted to do what we could with the finances that became available to build up our resiliency for the next pandemic and the one after that, et cetera, et cetera. So those were really our two main goals. Reducing the food waste was a great byproduct because, again, making a renewed market for those items that might have been left in the field. And I've already talked about the importance of providing fresh and nutritious food to our participants and those of the many other food assistance providers in the county. So that's what we wanted to do. Next slide. So how did we do it? The direct purchasing part of this program really represents another pivot that we undertook during the pandemic. We have a program at MANA called Community Food Rescue. We've had it for several years. And originally it was set up to match product from donor businesses, which could be restaurants, caterers, wholesalers, grocery stores, and in some cases they were farms, and match that product with food assistance providers in the county that could take it and distribute it to families. The program, Community Food Rescue, makes a three-way match with a volunteer in the community who will drive that food from the donor business to the food assistance provider. And that had been happening for several years prior to COVID. When the Farm to Food Bank program and the expansion of it came about, we knew we had a lot of the assets inherent in this infrastructure that would work really well for a program wherein we wanted to get food fresh from the farm directly to providers. We had to bypass the fact that not a lot of farms and not a lot of providers have a lot of cold storage to keep some of this very perishable food. So we wanted to do the matches in real time as much as possible. And so this community food rescue infrastructure that already existed, we adapted it in order to make it work for Farm to Food Bank. And so the way that this works is that the farms make offers through the software that CFR has been using for years. It's called Chow Match. We had to make some adaptations, and I know our program director for CFR, Cheryl Collin, is on the webinar watching. So shout out to her and her team for being able to make the adaptations that were needed to make this software work how we wanted it to. So the farms can make offers through the Chow Match application, and then the CFR team uses that information to match it with an appropriate food assistance provider. We have dozens of food assistance providers in the network already. They've all filled out profiles that give us information about when they're providing food, do they have cold storage, when are they operating, who do we contact, all the information we needed to make a good match. And then if we are able to accept the offers that the farms put forth, we can send out a food runner to go to the farm and pick up the product and bring it directly to the food assistance provider. Now, what do we use to determine whether we're going to take offers? We're thinking about price, of course. So budget is always a necessary and sometimes unfortunate limiting factor that we have. So we have to think about how much money we have available to spend. What are the preferences of the individuals who are seeking food from the food assistance providers? So we did this through a survey this year of our food assistance providers to try and understand what are those most wanted foods. We also have to look at shelf life and our ability to store and transport the product. And we have to see what other offers are being put forth in a given week. So if we have 10 offers for kale at the height of the season for greens, we can't take all the offers for kale that particular week. We might hold off and work with a different farm the next week. And then at the very end, offers been accepted, food has gotten to the food assistance provider, the farm invoices MANA, and we pay them for the product at the agreed upon price. And our last thing I'll say here is that our prices are ideally somewhere between a retail price and a wholesale price. So we want to be competitive. We really want to make the food assistance provider a viable customer for the farmer. Next slide, please. So this is a great illustration of some of the examples of matches that were made over the course of the program thus far. We've got eggs from Bella Vita Farm that went to an organization called Judy Center, which works at a couple local elementary schools. We've got a couple other agencies represented here. I will point out So What Else, who you'll get to hear from in a little bit. And they here in this picture, we're getting locally produced beef or pork from Savage Acres. And I will point out that Manna Food Center, as the administrator of this program, we're really trying to get this food out to the many other food assistance providers that we work with, but we do keep a certain percentage of it, I almost said for ourselves. We also share that out to the community, but it comes directly to our warehouse, and then we're able to give it out at many of our distribution sites. And this works best, especially for very large quantities of product from a couple of our largest farms in the county. In this picture, you're seeing Gaylords, those big cardboard boxes filled maybe with sweet corn from Lewis Orchard. So we'll take some of that indirectly and won't always match it through the CFR program if it makes less sense to do so. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the second goal of the program was really to build resiliency and capacity in the local farming community. And we are doing that through capacity building grant initiative. So we were able to do it for the first time last year. We had, because of CARES Act funding, a large sum of money that we could share through these capacity building grants. We had 236,000, a little bit more than that. And we were able to grant 22 farms with funding that they could use to build infrastructure to extend their growing season, or maybe they needed to purchase seedlings to grow greater quantities of food. Anything that they needed in terms of equipment or supplies to be able to grow more food for the food assistance network in the next year, they were able to apply for. And in that grant process, we were able to give up to $20,000 per farm. It's a simple application process. We definitely don't want this to be onerous on our farmers who are busy doing so many other things. It's a simple Google form, and it just asks for, what do you need? How is that going to help you grow more food? How much is it going to cost? And how are you going to sustain it over time? And these grant processes have both emphasized and prioritized historically marginalized farmers. We asked that question in the grant application. Are these funds going to help increase gender diversity and racial diversity in the farming community? And will they also support sustainable farming practices? And so that will get farmers additional points in the review process. We are going to do the capacity building grants. In fact, applications just closed at the end of November for this next round. Unfortunately, we have just a little bit less money to work with this year, but still $100,000 is nothing to shake a stick at. And so we'll be able to, by early January, get checks out to farms for this next round of capacity building. And this image you see here, just before we go on to the next slide, is funds that were used to create a packing house at Amaranth Acres. And you'll hear from the farmer at Amaranth Acres in a few minutes. Next slide, I think we've got a few more images to show of different things that farmers used the money for. Right, so we've got soil amendments, making raised beds, and also some of the supplies you see that farmer using were financed through these grants, as well as deer fence. Deer can be a huge problem at some of our local farms, so that was used to protect the crops. Next slide, please. This is really what I'm most proud of about this program, and it's really the expansion in farmer engagement over the course of the couple of years we've had it in existence. So I mentioned at the beginning of my time that we were working with 4 farms when this first started. After the first direct purchasing round, we had 11 farms who had signed on. After the first grant process, we had 22 farms that had signed on. And since then, because of word of mouth and really the popularity of the program, we now have actually 34 farms, it needs to be updated, 34 farms who have made offers or in some cases have donated product because of the program, the Farm to Food Bank program. Next slide, please. Great, and here you'll see the program to date progress. So we've been able to deliver 112,000 plus pounds of fresh, locally produced food that we've shared with over 30 food assistance providers in the county. I don't always like to talk in pounds when we talk about the success of this program, because not all food weighs a whole lot, but it's still really, really valuable. So if you look at a beautiful bunch of greens that come early in the season, they're not going to weigh a whole ton, but they are super nutrient dense, and they are extremely valuable to our food system nonetheless. So here are some other ways we like to talk about our progress. We were able to share 3,390 apples, 942 dozen eggs, 400 sacks of locally grown oats. We have a farmer in the county who's growing grains and beans, which is very interesting. And then I mentioned some of the beef and pork earlier. And I do want to bring back one point I made earlier about the cultural diversity that we're looking to really foster and support. And so we have several participating farms, one of them Amaranth Acres that you'll hear from, producing food that is very popular among some communities in our area, including bitter gourd and Kuano or horned melon, bottle gourd, and others. So we're really glad to have the diversity that we have in our farming community, that's creating a great diverse amount of product that's going to our neighbors who could use a little support. And I want to end my section by just sharing actually a quote from one of our farms who participated this year, who said that we at this program purchase produce at a reasonable price in bulk and others come to pick it up. I've farmed for 13 years. This is manna from the sky. I can't imagine a better way to support local farms. And it's really those comments that I think make this program feel so rewarding to be a part of. We are the administrator, but we are not by any means alone in making this program a success. So the Montgomery County Food Council, the Department of the Office of Agriculture for Montgomery County, we three make up the coordinating groups for the program. So I do want to say thank you. And of course, all of this would be for naught if we didn't have fantastic community organizations who are getting this food out to people who need it. And I'm going to turn it over to Megan Joe from So What Else to tell us a little bit about their experience with the program.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Megan. I'm the operations director for the Hunger Relief Program for So What Else. And so we have been getting food through the program, I guess, since the pandemic started, and we've been, it's been consistent. And one of the biggest things is the variety that they provide. The eggs is like huge. It's something that we never get unless it's from Bella Vita. And like you guys saw the picture of Savage Acre Farms, we picked up a bunch of local meat from there. And so we did pick up from Savage Acre Farms that one time, but most of the time the food comes in through community chow match. And so that's a huge benefit for us because as everyone knows, food assistance is such like a crazy busy job. So any food that can come straight to us is just, it's huge. And so, you know, the Farm to Food Bank program has been super helpful for our program and the participants. So yeah, so I'll pass it over to Indhu, who can share her experience.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Indhu. I've been farming for about 7 years now. Originally a software engineer, and I didn't mean to be a farmer. You could consider me an accidental farmer, meaning I wanted to grow vegetables, like Indian vegetables primarily, because I couldn't find any locally grown or organic or pesticide-free Indian vegetables. So I started growing them, and when I go to visit friends, I carry a bag of vegetables to give it to them as gifts. And it seemed like most of them wanted to buy them, meaning like they weren't getting anything that fresh. So they said, why don't you start selling? So I said, okay, let me try. And I started initially doing some retail sales, and that didn't quite work out with my schedule and everything else that was going on. So I hit upon doing some CSA, first with like 10 members initially the first year. And like this 2021 was the 5th year I did. Now I have far too many people wanting to be members than I can take on, which means I have to start growing more. And during one of the events for farmers at the Montgomery County Center at Durwood, I ran into Susan Wexler, who said, is there any way you can provide vegetables for us? Till then, I didn't know that was even a possibility, because I thought this was a very small group of people who'd be interested in these vegetables. And then 2020, late 2020 is when I heard of the Farm to Food Bank program. And that's the first year I offered some pumpkins. And even then I didn't think people really wanted pumpkins. And then this year has been great, meaning like, for me, like, I think Jenna touched on it, like as a farmer, I have time and resources is premium, never have enough time and never have enough people to do the work. So with this, when I provide the vegetables, there's the CFR volunteers who are amazing. I've seen some really fantastic people who come to pick up the vegetables and they drop it off to the agencies. And the other thing is there's less wastage, because usually even if there's excess, I'm not able to go and give it to any charitable organization just because there's not enough time. And when they are open, I don't have the time. And when I'm ready to go give it, they're not open. So this has been really great. And what else did I want to say? I also like last year is when I think things became quite obvious in many ways, like how this local food system has to be resilient, has to be robust for us to not be dependent on outside forces, and especially for those who can't really afford to buy vegetables. Like it also gives away, because CSA has this reputation that it's very expensive. Fresh vegetables from farmers markets are really expensive. So this program in a way helps us provide to the less needy, to the needy in our community. So thanks to the program.
Thank you, Indhu. Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Jenna, so much for your contributions and for that very insightful presentation and discussion that you just provided us. So now we are going to move to discussion. For that, I need to change the screen. And I know that you've all shared from your experiences, how have you participated, supported, administered the program, and that you have touched upon some of the local assets and factors that have facilitated your participation in this program. But could you each share a little bit more about what you see as those key unique assets here in the county that you think made this program possible and your participation in the program possible? And whoever, Jenna, maybe you want to start.
Sure, I will. Yeah, I think that in terms of assets, the first was governmental support. So I saw some other questions about funding, and that really gets to that need. And first and foremost, it was funding through the county via the CARES Act that really made this expansion possible. Mm-hmm. Now, since that time, we have been able to get some private funding as well. So this year, actually, the county is not the primary funder anymore, but a local organization called the Greater Washington Community Foundation is funding the vast majority of our expenses. And so, but it was very, very important, I think, from the get-go to have the county council and county executives support for it. We were able to prove that it works, that it's valuable to all the stakeholders involved, and then be able to pitch it to a local foundation that saw the value of it and is now investing in it, and hopefully will continue to invest in it. But certainly funding is an asset, and getting the governmental buy-in will, I think, prove to be an asset in order to sustain the program. My hope is that it can be attached to some sort of revenue generating stream for the county so that we can continue to have money coming in, because having to fund it every single year by making grant requests and foundation requests is, that's much more tenuous way to go for a program that's this critical.
Thank you, Jen. Indhu or Megan, do you have any thoughts on what facilitated your participation in the program?
Oh, yeah, like I mentioned, the community food rescue organization, which matches the vegetables. So within a span of 2 to 3 days, which is normally when we'd be able to find out if we have vegetables that we can offer, they are able to find a match so that the vegetables are like harvested the previous day and they get taken to the thing. As a farmer, for me specifically, I harvest, which I have to do anyway. That's all I do. I don't do any extra work in terms of carrying it to the organization. All of that is done by the CFR folks. And Jenna, any other questions? Jenna is readily available to give those answers. So for me, it's been really very easy to participate in that program. So and it's very clear what we need to do. There are instructions that are pretty simple. When I looked at the Chow Match application, I thought, man, but then once you go through it, it's pretty simple. So yeah, and I was so surprised, like it's these volunteers who are taking the food to the organizations. They haven't missed it even one day. It's like, I'm thinking, oh, maybe they won't turn up today, but they call me like an hour ahead of time, letting me know what time they'll be there. So it's been really very easy to participate. And for me, like normally what I would have done with the excess produce is retail sales is not very, like, it's not guaranteed, right? So it's an extra revenue stream in terms of helping, like the farm has to be sustainable for it to be in business for a longer term. So this is one other avenue by which we are able to get sell our vegetables to, and it's great that it's done to the local community.
Okay. So following up on that, how do you, what was needed or what happened? Like, how did this community food rescue came to be? Like, what are things that other communities that might not have that infrastructure, what do they need to keep in mind or like consider? Because that volunteer network and that system seems to be kind of foundational. So what are some of the key components of that one?
Of community food rescue.
Yeah.
So once again, as I said in the answer to the last question, government involvement was really key in that. And not to say that we need to have the government involved in every action we take that's supportive to our communities. But in this instance, about 8 years ago, the county government, the county council decided that they wanted to do more to reduce food waste in the county. And so they put together a task force to consider the question and what could we do. And that task force said we should have a centralized leadership on this issue and a group that could take it on and figure out how to create a coordinated system to tackle the issue. And so an RFP was put out with funding behind it. And then a few groups applied for that, Manna being one of them. And we were ultimately awarded the contract. Were there not funding at that particular time to help us establish such a program? We needed to find a software program, or we wouldn't have needed to build one. We actually found one that now we license, which is the Chow Match application we've been talking about, but that requires money, and it requires money to continue to license that software every year. The volunteers are marvelous, and of course they don't require any sort of funding to do what they do. They're doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. But there needs to be a lot of, at least some, human power behind the coordination of those volunteers and the matching. Even, we talk about this application as if it's automated completely, and Indhu just puts in her offer, and the computer knows to connect her with Meg and Joe over at So What Else, and that's that. But actually, it does involve a lot of human intervention too, to make sure that the matches that are made are viable. So that's part of it as well. And I'd be happy if anybody wants to reach out to me. I'll put my contact. Well, I know it'll be at the end of the presentation too. If you want to talk in more detail with, actually, Cheryl would be your go-to expert on the CFR program. About the infrastructure for that. But it was great that we had it. And then when this problem came up, or this desire to connect the farming community in this way came up, we had an infrastructure that could be easily adapted.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenna. So Megan, I'm gonna send it to you if you're ready, because I'm really interested in your perspective of what has facilitated your participation in this program. And also if you could speak about, of course, the other side of the coin, the challenges, if any, that you have faced or that you have encountered participating.
Okay, well, yeah, I guess I participate in the program because I really feel like there's no reason not to. It's made to be really user-friendly, and it's really beneficial, and there really is no hassle on my part. The volunteers are super communicative, and so like, even if like I make a mistake and I forget, we closed early today, or we were like in the process of moving from our Rockville location to our Lake Forest location, and so Cheryl was so helpful. Being able to like help me communicate with the volunteers that, the location which changed. And so Cheryl was amazing because she was always like, so Cheryl and Susan, I would text them and I would say, oh no, like I forgot to update, that it's a new location today. And they would just be like so on it and help me like communicate with the volunteer. And so obviously Cheryl and Susan are awesome, but then also the volunteers, like they're so responsive and they're so flexible and going to Rockville or Gaithersburg to drop off the food. And so really no challenges. And I truly don't see any reason not to participate in the program, because it's just like all benefits, and it like you guys make it so easy for us. So yeah, thank you so much for like letting us participate.
Thank you, Megan, for your thoughts. So I know that Megan said that there were no challenges for her, but Jenna or Indhu, I know Indhu, you've also touched on this to some extent, but are there some like key challenges that you faced? And if you also have thoughts on how you have worked to address those challenges, please share.
I have to think really hard to come up with challenges, which means the program is working. The only challenge, this is something I think they're already addressing, meaning what kinds of vegetables and in what quantities that will be needed. That's the only challenge that I can see. But otherwise, it's mostly like the process itself goes very smooth. And you'd be amazed that it's done by volunteers. Like I said, I have volunteers who come to volunteer to work at the farm, and they'll call me 2 minutes before, like an hour before, and said I can't turn up. So I was expecting that to happen with the CFR, but not a day. Like they were like fantastic. So yeah.
This is exactly what I want to hear. All the challenges are on our shoulders, and the farmers and the food assistance providers feel like it's operating seamlessly. The challenges, I would say the biggest challenge for me from my perspective, so I said at the earlier on in the presentation that farmers send me the invoices. And so I've become had to take on this unfortunate role of being the person who says, we don't have money for that, or we do have money for that. And how much should we charge? Farmers are always emailing me and saying, well, you know, how much for this product? And Indhu has done this, like, how much for this eggplant? And I'll be like, well, maybe this much. And she'll say, well, it takes me at least this much to produce it. And so we have this negotiation, which, one, I'm very glad that we're having the conversation. I do not want to just put prices out there that don't work for the farmers. But they also have to work for our budget. And that's not always, it's never feels really easy to do, to find that sweet spot where it's a reasonable price that makes it worth their while to participate. Because we have to remember, farms are businesses, right? So it has to work for their bottom line. Even if they're the most altruistic farmer, they can't just go about donating all the product that they grow. That doesn't work. So we still want to provide a price that actually acknowledges how much time, how much sweat, how much of their own, money and labor is put into this. But when we're dealing with, when this is funded through the generosity of, philanthropic efforts, we can't always find that sweet spot. So that's the biggest challenge, in my opinion. And I know there were some questions about pricing. I will say we have not cracked the nut on that. We started out with prices that were very, very generous. And that's, I think, why a large part of how we got 34 farms to want to participate. Now that we have this great network, we don't want to lose them, but we do have to have a pricing structure that is sustainable. And so that means that the prices had to go down to some degree. And we also had to make hard choices about what foods to prioritize. So farmers are growing, wonderful fresh herbs, garlic, ginger. And we had to say, for this program, at least, we won't be purchasing those items because they're just too expensive and not substantial enough of a part of a meal to make it worthwhile for the purpose we're using it for. And that was a really hard decision. We had one farmer who had grown a whole bunch of ginger and was like, what do you mean you can't take my ginger now? And I didn't, we hadn't talked about that ahead of time. So I didn't know they were growing ginger explicitly for this program. And it turned out okay in the end. But the amount of heartburn I have and my team trying to figure out what's a good price that will actually work for us in the long term.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you so much. So now in the last 5-6 minutes we wanted to take some of the questions that were submitted by some of the registrants and also by you in the audience. And for that, I am going to send it to my colleague, Jiwon, who's going to be guiding us through the Q&A.
Sure. So we've been receiving questions throughout the webinar, and one question someone posed to you, Jenna, is, do you have any policies that strive to have equitable distribution to food assistance providers? You mentioned the human intervention process that you need to do through your matching system. Would you talk more about that?
Sure. Megan Joe's ears are perking up. We don't have set policies around how we prioritize which food assistance providers. I mentioned that CFR has a network of, Cheryl maybe we'll put the exact number in the chat, but let's say it's, upwards of 80, 90 different food assistance providers. But as with our volunteers, we've got so many people who have signed up over the years, and there we go, 116 organizations in our network. Thank you, Cheryl. Not all of them are active partners in the network. So they're not in conversation with us all the time. They're not updating their profile. They're not open at the hours that are most convenient. So in some ways, the organizations sort of weed themselves out, I will say, based on the fact that we need organizations who are available at certain times of the day, who are able to be flexible enough to take different types of items. If you're an organization that has cold storage, that's a plus for you in terms of the network, but it doesn't mean that you're not going to get product if you don't, but it can mean that we can be a little bit more flexible with the timing. We have some organizations who prepare food from scratch, and so they're able to take ingredients that are maybe more niche, and that we won't be able to find an exact match for, because they can put it into a dish and then serve it as a meal. This also allows them to take product that might not be as, maybe a little bit, have a little bit of a shorter shelf life than organizations that are giving out food directly. So it's all these priorities kind of go into the mix when trying to do the matching. But I think we've done fairly well. I wouldn't be able to say, maybe Cheryl would, how many of those 116 feel active to us, but we've been able to provide food to around 40 different organizations over the course of the Farm to Food Bank program. So we try our best to not just prioritize a handful of providers as best as we can.
Are there any more questions, you want?
Yep. So we have a request about donating produce and who they should contact. So Jenna, if you want to just type in your information for everyone, that would be good. And then another question that we received from a participant is that they're creating an urban farm to provide fresh produce to food rescue organizations. What are some technical requirements they should consider?
I think that for us, it's a little different because we serve truly like so many different people, and so many people come through the line where it, some food may be culturally appropriate for some people and not for other people. So we're super open to literally any kind of food. And so, people also like discovering new produce at our table. So if they're not familiar with it, they can get familiar with it. But also for us, our timing is pretty open. Like we're open Monday through Friday and Sunday sometimes. And I usually I've told Cheryl and Susan that like if people needed to distribute food on Saturday, we're not normally open, but we have a fridge that they could put it in. So, for me, I don't like to be picky, because the pickier you are, like the less food comes to you. So, I don't know. I don't know exactly like if they're trying to provide food, like what they should be mindful of. I think for other organizations, they may have like more specific things that they need to help support them in like how they distribute it. So yes, I don't know if that was helpful. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. And thank you, G1, for facilitating the Q&A. And it is 3 p.m. in the eastern part of the United States. So I think we can wrap it up. Was there anything else, G1?
We shared a resource, Farm to Food Bank, the report. Jenna, if you want to say a little bit about the report that was shared. Yeah.
I was busy typing answers to the questions in the Q&A window. But yes, so this is a report that the Food Council and Manna Food Center worked on to summarize the progress of Farm to Food Bank to date. So some of the questions that were in the Q&A will be answered by this report. If they aren't, please reach out to me. Always happy to talk about this program.